welcome to another episode of the Young Tongues podcast. My name is Barbara Fountain. I'm the founder and CEO of the Young Tongues, a peer-to-peer support group for young tongue cancer patients. And I bring you another fabulous patient story this week. With me today is Pete. Pete, it's so lovely to have you here. We've had a little bit of email interactions with each other over the last few months, but maybe just to start things off, who is Pete beyond the cancer diagnosis? Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi Barbara, and great to be with you today. I'm Pete Jackson. I just qualified to be part of Young Tongues on the basis that I'm 62
Yay!
and come on the upper end of the spectrum. But I'm married to Laura, and it's been absolutely brilliant for me over the last 6 months. I've got two grown-up children, Reese and Jenny, who live away, but very much part of my journey as well. I live in Telford in Shropshire, which in the UK, which is in the middle of England for those of you abroad. And I work actually in adult social care, so I do work and have worked over the last decade, working with people with different learning disabilities and with older people, but also people obviously who've got all sorts of caring needs. And one of the themes that we often talk about is about lived experience. So this journey is very much sort of been about me being on the other side of the fence and seeing and learning all sorts of things about not only myself but also about the health and care services that we obviously all rely on once we're in the system and diagnosed with tongue cancer. I'm very active in my local community, always have been. So I'm a doer. I'm an activist, I suppose. I get involved in all sorts of projects and schemes. But prior to diagnosis, I was also trying to be very fit and doing a lot of running, doing the park runs on a Saturday morning, and that was really good for me at the start to go into this feeling strong and fit. But so I'm as I say, wear all sorts of hats, but for this one I'm wearing the hat of Pete Jackson, the patient, or whatever we call ourselves, who's been battling against tongue cancer for the last 6 months in particular.
Absolutely. Well, I'm delighted to have you here, and I'm so glad we finally get to meet face to face as well, but be it virtual, but nonetheless.
Yeah.
Now, Pete, I guess let's start at the beginning. When did you first realise something wasn't right? How did you get alerted that something isn't quite feeling right? What were your
Mm.
symptoms?
Yeah, well, you sort of play big things back, don't you, in your mind, really, when you sort of get into it and you sort of forget about different events. But for me, it was probably in 2002, so nearly 3 years ago now, that I went to the dentist and said, I've got this sort of, I can't really describe it really, but a dull feeling in the side of my mouth. Look, they can't really see anything, there's nothing to show. And I was sort of, they said, oh, your tongue looks really healthy, and but we'll send you to the multifacial dentist to have a look. And I went along there, not thinking, just sort of thinking, well, actually, I don't no idea what's going on here, something's there. And he poked me with a big long lollipop stick and said, does that hurt? What's that feel like? And he said, can't really see anything. He said there might be an ulcer possibly, but nothing to worry about. I was diagnosed with some antiseptic mouthwash and sent on my way. And it was probably, I kept thinking, my eating was changing. I was sort of thinking I'm eating on the left hand side all the time. But again, I wasn't really concerned. And then one morning, which was probably in the summer last year, there's probably a song in here somewhere, Barbara. It started with a kiss, and I kissed my wife goodbye on the way to work one morning, and just playfully we both stuck out our tongues at each other,
Oh.
And Laura said, stick your tongue out straight. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, your tongue's coming right. And when I
Mm,
looked, my tongue was, I couldn't stick it out straight. It
mm,
was going just to the right hand side. And that was, again, I thought, oh, that's obviously, well, she thought it was weird. We laughed about it really, thinking, oh, that's really funny, can't stick your tongue out straight, and blah, blah, blah.
mm,
But I went back to the dentist and she again said, yeah, there's something clearly not right, and referred me back to the maxillofacial clinic. And they took me in and said, yeah, we think you need to have a scan. So
mm.
they did x-rays and all the rest of it. Um, and then, that was it really. Very quickly afterwards, 2 weeks later, the um, diagnosis came back and they said, actually, we need to speech here looks like they've got some sort of growth underneath your tongue,
Mhm.
and we need to look at it further. And then again, few more scans and inspections, and the diagnosis came through that I've got cancer underneath, sort of growth, 4.5 centimetres underneath the back of my tongue on the right hand side.
So when you say beneath your tongue, is it still on the cavity of the tongue, as in the tongue that we can pull out, or was it on the floor?
It was on the cavity. It was actually on the tongue, on underneath the tongue.
Underneath the tongue, so on the underside
Yeah,
of the tongue. Oh,
yeah,
wow. Okay.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
guess you would have, well, because many, I say many of us have like an ulcer and you can see the ulcer, but you didn't actually have anything visible,
Not
only
really.
that your
No.
tongue, when you pointed it out, came out. Oh, that's, wow, incredible. I mean, what a blessing that a kiss actually saved your life in a way, because
Well,
I guess
possibly.
it's
Yeah.
diagnosed as relatively early. What was the prognostic for you? What when you got the news? What, how much information, how much overwhelming information did they give you? How much of a plan did they have in terms of what your treatment was going to look like?
Yeah, well, I remember the meeting, as I'd imagine all of us do, really, when you sat
Mm,
down with the oncologist and the registrar and the nurse and various other people in the room. And I'd never had, certainly me and Laura, neither of us had had cancer in the family before. So it was, first of all, is coming to terms with the language and all sorts of words that no idea what that means. Even oncologist, actually, I wasn't necessarily clear what that was until I looked it up and checked. And one of the things that's really stuck in my mind about that first session was the registrar. He said, I'll draw you a little sketch. And it was basically Edward Munch, The Scream. And it was a circular head, mouth with a black mark in it, and my tongue. And uh, that was really significant to me, actually. And that drawing actually has stuck
mm,
with me all the way through the treatment. Because obviously what went with it was also the diagnosis in terms of how far it had spread, what level it was at, etc. And I think what coming out of that meeting, um, feeling, I suppose, reassured that it'd been caught relatively early. It hadn't spread to lymph nodes or further into my throat. They didn't think anyway. And the treatment, they said to me, Barbara Laffey, she said, as a relatively young and fit person
mhm,
at 62, we think the treatments will be fairly straightforward. Um, you're a good candidate. Actually, there's every chance that actually you will be, you can be cured. And that message actually, for me and my wife, took a whole load of,
mm,
I suppose, worry and pressure off, even though it was still cancer and there's still going to be treatment, but actually it was curable. That was the words that stuck in, I think, both our minds, that there's going to be an outcome for this
mm.
that could be really positive. So
And that's the key thing with early diagnosis, is that these types
yeah,
of cancers really can be curable if caught and treated correctly early.
yeah, yeah,
So what was the treatment for you, Pete?
yeah.
Where
So
did it start?
well, yeah. I say it started with a kiss. It's probably continued with a realization about again what chemotherapy and radiotherapy were about. Again, no real knowledge of it. So they said actually it's going to be 6 week course. You'll have radiotherapy every day, every weekday for 30 days, and chemotherapy is a bonus on a Tuesday. Every Tuesday for the next 6 weeks as well. So it's basically a month long six week course where I travelled from about 30 miles to our cancer HQ in Shrewsbury. And it started actually, well, it didn't start straight away, of course, because although it was a diagnosis, what again I didn't really appreciate or understand was how many things they needed to do before we got started. So, the mask making, which again I found just amazing, really, when I realised what I was going to have built around my face and what the purpose of that was going to be. The fitting of the peg, so again to be able to feed and think, well, what's that about? But looking back, actually, that was obviously a lifesaver. And then all of the other sort of visits to speech language nutritionists, dietitians, all sorts of appointments, all sorts of people and professions that I didn't know existed. Even as somebody working in care and sort of thinking I know quite a lot about things, I just thought my mind was just blown by how many people actually I was interacting with, leading up to the treatment, and then obviously so many more people beyond that. But so yeah,
Yeah,
um,
and you're a bit of a unique person, I guess, in our community, because it doesn't sound like they considered operating and doing any type of gastrectomy for you, which is,
no,
I mean, is great to be able to
well,
keep your tongue fully.
yeah, well, obviously I had obviously they did a biopsy, which that was I see all of the since joining the Young Tongues, and I see the stories and the things that people had to do, which again was not in my consciousness at all. And then thinking, you partly think how lucky you are, how fortunate I was to both be diagnosed early, to be able to just have
There's no just
radiotherapy. There's
about
no just about it.
radiation and
No,
chemo,
no, absolutely.
but not on top of, maybe we
Yeah,
could say.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
So, so starting to sort of realise what that the treatment was going to be, but actually the biopsy, I got, I suppose, an indication of what it feels like to be operated on. The pain that was probably for me the most pain that I had after just a little biopsy, really, and the recovery and the realisation about how much goes on in your mouth again that you're not aware of, that you don't think about, but actually you realise once you've had someone poking around and doing a bit of cutting and chopping, how that affects all sorts of things really about as part of your
Yeah.
day-to-day life.
I do have to say, though, that for me, who has had a partial gastrectomy, the biopsy was still way more painful than the
Mm,
actual gastrectomy, because I was pretty happy high on morphine, but they
absolutely.
don't give you adequate pain relief when doing the biopsy. So that is something we definitely want to raise
Yeah.
awareness and shine a light on, because we don't feel that it has to be quite as a painful experience as it is at the moment.
Mm, yeah.
Um,
Just
but yeah, no, so yeah, so the biopsy, it's crazy, isn't it? The first time you suddenly become really ultra aware of everything that goes on in your mouth.
yeah. Yeah.
So we talked about the lead up to radiation.
Mm,
And I guess this has given me a bit of a picture as well, because I suddenly received an email in my inbox, and I was a little bit behind on clearing my emails, and I suddenly saw, oh, someone set up a fundraising page. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I read your story, and I straight away was like, oh my God. Because so you started fundraising at I mean, very, very successfully before you even started your treatment.
Mhm.
And I had my concerns, which I'm sure you got from my email, because I just wanted to make sure that on top of going through treatment, you didn't put any pressure on yourself. But I very much got the feeling from you that actually galvanized you and it gave something to
Mhm.
focus on. So I don't know how that experience was for you between the diagnosis to starting treatment. I guess that is one tool you used to
Yeah,
help. What
yeah,
what else helped you during that time?
yeah. It was, I suppose, um, I've got a very, I suppose, I don't know how to say that, curious mind or active mind, really. So I'm a very, I describe myself as a very positive person. So, I always enter things with full of gusto. And I suppose I decided very early, I came across your podcast just by, as you do, you start Googling, and I looked on Spotify and I found, your face and you talking and just thought, wow. And then I looked on the Facebook group and just thought, this is just amazing. So the reason why it's amazing for me, well, was amazing for me, and why I so quickly decided that I wanted to raise money already, as part of my what I thought as a campaign. Really, I think I want to get this out there. I want as many people to know what's going on. I want many people to be involved in what I'm going through. Was the whole thing about peer support. So again, in my work, social care work, we do a lot of it's about peer to peer, whether it's about workers in similar professions or categories of work, or people with different learning disabilities or age challenges. That they, often people say that the best support and advice to get is from people who have lived it, have been there and done it. And that just from just browsing on the very first day at looking at the Facebook page, I just thought, yeah, this is just absolutely brilliant, and it made me think very much about all the health support I'd already started to experience. So the NHS, full of admiration for the NHS. People have different, with somebody going through a tough time, but people, my experience very much was just brilliant people, um, compassionate people, technical people, um, knowledgeable people, but almost like taking that for granted. That I was only doing radiotherapy for, I don't know, 20 minutes a day. For the rest of my treatments, I was either at home with my wife, with family, people around me, and that was partly my philosophy and approach, was to sort of try and surround myself and remind myself about how many really, again, really fortunate, very strong family local to me, very wide network of friends. I've been like through Facebook and social media the last sort of decade, kept in touch with all sorts of people. And likewise, LinkedIn at work, having a big network of people that I've worked in. So sort of starting to realise these are all people that were going to give me energy and egg me on and encourage me. And as soon as I put the fundraising thing up, I just thought, actually, it's I was laughing at it. It's easy money, because actually people, it's a very practical way of people helping you. If
Yeah.
people want to help, people want to do things, and rather than saying sorry or hope you're all right, sort of the
Yeah.
idea of just giving a fiver or a tenner or whatever.
Were
And
you slightly surprised by how quickly and how much you raised?
well,
Because I was. I was like,
well,
wow,
I was,
fantastic.
I'm not, I've never been really a big one for charity and and giving, but I had a bit of a strategy about it, which was just, don't expect anyone to give you any money. Set your target very low, and then just keep beating it. So I was watching it. It's quite exciting, isn't it, when you sort of see things coming in. And I was looking at it. You get addicted to watching it every day. Got £100, and ended up at 500. I'll look my target again, and then that was just. It was again part of people sending you messages, sending you money. It seems like a very practical thing to do, as part of a number of things that I was doing to
Yeah.
try and keep myself focused on the future and on forward. And I'm not just about being grateful, but being really appreciative of how generous people are in the group at sharing their stories, actually, and that's really was really uplifting for me. I just can't telling everybody about it, and again, it's one of these things where if you're not in it, you don't really get it, but if you are in it, it just means so much
Yeah,
to have
and
somebody just.
yeah, and we're well, I'm entirely grateful to everyone within the community who shares their experiences and also asks questions and answers questions,
Yeah,
just to share their own perspective, because it is so great to see that there are so many different perspectives and different experiences, which I always feel that for someone, so I don't know, because when I got diagnosed there was
yeah,
nothing, so
no,
I
yeah,
had lots of questions, and I guess I would have liked to have known what are the different types of outcomes so I can brace myself for the worst but also hold on to the hope for the best, in terms of
yeah,
experiences. So I think that's the generosity of the community really does that. And you also contributed some fantastic videos and posts and insights that, we'll definitely come back to you and see if we can use on a wider platform.
yeah,
But yeah, no, it is fantastic. You mentioned like people, using fundraising as a way to help. But I wondered what your experiences were maybe for people closer to you, who wanted to support you. Did you find there were some? Because this is one of the big questions we get as a community of a lot. Like people say they want to help me, but I don't actually know what type of help I need.
yeah, yeah,
Do you have some good examples or things that you think, oh yeah, that was really nice, or I really enjoyed that?
yeah. Like in all my working life, really, I've always been involved in community things. So, one of the big things for me again was, I suppose, connectedness, about finding opportunities to either reconnect with people and spend time with people. So I did a lot of in the preparation, but also in the first weeks of radiotherapy, doing a lot of walking and deliberately asking people or finding people to walk with me, just to talk and obviously exercise and fresh air, mental health, all those sort of well-being things. But that also did make me realise how I suppose impotent people feel to know what to do and to know what to help. So again, my thoughts were really have no expectations that anyone's going to be able to help me other than probably Laura, my wife. That's the other big part of the story, isn't it? Is about partners and people who are very, very close to you, and about the impact it has on them. And in some ways, the impact is far greater on them than it is on you, because they're not they're not having the treatment, they're not having there, but they're watching and they're seeing the pain and they're seeing the faces and they're seeing all of the other things which they feel really difficult to know how to respond to. But no, that connectedness, about connecting with people. And I mentioned earlier on, I've always been big on the social media, and then realizing on through Facebook and LinkedIn how many people are out there who I'd forgotten about. Some people I'd forgotten about. Some people from when I was young, actually getting in touch with me and saying, "Oh, I've seen your story, we've seen your little video talking about what you're going through. Keep on keeping on." That was my strap line. Keep on keeping on. Sort of. And that again was a really part of the coping strategy, I suppose, for me. Was about wanting people to know what was happening, but equally wanting to know that I really appreciated their support in whatever form it came. And that's been really, really probably the overwhelming thing of the whole journey has been that support around me from my friends, family. I've done, I don't know if you remember, but I haven't got it in actually, but I did a painting. Another part of what I did was I'm not an artist, well, I don't know what an artist is really, but I like having a go at things. So I decided I was wanting to do, well, as soon as I saw the mask, I thought I want to do something with that mask. And the idea was, or it evolved into thinking about the mask being a very physical representation of the technology. Technology, you see the radiotherapy machines, incredible science and wizardry, accuracy, and then thinking actually that's the really hard medical end. But the softer bit really was all the, I identified as like 6 groups of people really that I was relying on: my family, my immediate family, close friends and wider friendship groups, people from work, my work colleagues, the people that you meet on the way, the sort of community, the people that you sort of see in the waiting room, and you get to chat to people who you're sitting next to while you're having chemo, and you sort of say, oh, he's a bit out further advanced than me, how's it going? And you get such brilliant feedback. Um, and then the hospitals, the NHS care staff, I was trying to keep a record of how many people I'd seen. And on my picture, I'd sort of calculated there was probably about 120, 130 people while I was doing radiotherapy that I'd met, whose name had told me their name, and I'd told me that, I'd told them my NHS number and as part of the routine. And those being a really big group of people, but you only often see them once or maybe twice.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
and
the
and it
sixth group that,
continues on as you go through checkups.
absolutely,
There'll be more and more,
absolutely.
and suddenly different types of people.
But then
Yeah.
the sixth group was about the young tongues, and I specifically knew from as I say, from the very first, how important that was going to be to me, of how much information that I was gaining from listening to your podcasts, from seeing the people on the Facebook page, and that again, I just thought that spectrum of people made me think, wow, there's so many people who were there, and there was a little video that I made at the start, which was doing realizing what the radiotherapy machine did, the arc, that was the thing, the arc, that what was going on in that arc, and then realizing that there was all these people underneath supporting me, and that was sort of an image in my mind, which every day when I went into that, put the mask on, I was thinking, God, this is surreal, but actually there's all these people looking out, waiting for me, watching for me, wanting to know what's happening, not really able to appreciate what you're going through, but equally wanting to be by your side, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a beautiful image. Speaking of radiotherapy and chemo, so if we continue on in the timeline, so to speak, so we start off how. Firstly, I guess let's explore the first week, because everything's new
Yeah,
routine,
yeah, yeah.
different noises, different feelings.
Mm.
How would you describe them honestly, whilst also thinking about if someone's listening who's about to start radiotherapy, what's the sort of wisdom that you would want to impart on them in terms of going into this experience?
Like again, I suppose the journey from the car park to the reception. It's called the Lyndon Davis Centre, which is in Shrewsbury. And what struck me was how calm it was compared to other experiences of going into, I don't know, A&E or hospital generally, or even the GP surgery. That the first person that you see was the receptionist, and she actually, there was a number of them, were all so welcoming, and I was struck by, even after the second or third day, they welcomed me saying, "Hi Pete, good to see you," and that was, again, just a very human touch, but actually made a big difference to what I was, I suppose, fearing, something that Laura was fearing probably more so. And then going into a big waiting room and looking around, um, I'm partly feeling slightly overwhelmed, and then looking around and thinking, God, look at these people, and there's always people who are, you can just see are far worse off than yourself, and then realizing again, sitting in the waiting room, sitting next to people. It was mainly, when I was waiting for the radiotherapy, it was mainly blokes actually who were prostate cancer, and it was almost like the dark humour and the sort of cheery spirit of, things that they say to each. You're getting this sort of spirit, like the camaraderie about it, really. that everybody, people are in it together. But the fear, the first time I lay on the radiotherapy bench and had the mask fitted on, tied down for the first time, um, I was I wasn't prepared for that at all. Actually, how I was going to feel. Um, they said all the time about making sure you didn't put too much weight on it, and it felt just really tight. And I'd not thought about my breathing. I'd not thought about how to prepare myself. And first sort of few seconds thinking, what's going on? And then trying to think, breaths, trying to relax, trying to breathe in and breathe out. And actually, after the first experience where a bit of my face had got trapped and it was feeling my eyelid hadn't closed properly and it felt really tight. The second time, knowing what I was going to expect and thinking actually I've got to take some deep breaths here. I've got to relax. I've got to make sure I'm taking my time and not being rushed. And then it felt a lot better. And what also really helped me was that after the second session, I'd asked them if they'd video me, and that really helped me because you don't know what's going on around you, and seeing the thing the way it went and recognising the noises and what they meant and where they were, what part of the cycle that was. That really helped me going forward. I think if I hadn't seen the machine, I wouldn't have had any idea about what was going on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I felt similar about totally different, but the MRI machine,
Yeah,
because that when you go in for a scan, like so much noise, and
yeah,
I used to say it sounds like a yeti trying to break in. But
yeah,
once I sort of looked at MRI machines and what happens and how they work, I was like, oh, okay. So it becomes something that you can logically explain to you more in terms of a
yeah,
mechanism, a technology.
yeah,
So yeah, I can see that being really impactful, being able to have a video of yourself
yeah,
having radiotherapy. So you
yeah,
know, and did you do that quite early on, or
yeah. I did it.
yeah?
Again, because I was so fascinated with the mask. I did post about the mask, and there's obviously people have very different feelings towards the
Feelings,
mask.
yeah.
In fact, one of the guys who was just ahead of me, he said he suffered from claustrophobia, and actually he struggled all the way through. He had to have, be had some medication to help him relax, and I could see that why that would be so hard if you were that way inclined. But no, I wanted to record it. I wanted people to know about it. Partly about raising awareness, I think. That's what I also realised. When I read the young tongue stuff and realising that actually it's a lot of young women actually who actually seem to be in terms of the demographics. Not many people my age or certainly with what I had started, not never smoked in my life, so that was the sort of thing again that you sort of think, oh, what's that? I've never smoked. I might drink a bit, but and
Yeah.
that sort of realising HP and sort of positive and what's that all about, finding that sort of all things that started reading and then sort of started like you can overthink things and start
Yeah.
to think all sorts of things.
I think you touch on a really important subject there, though, because statistically speaking, it is actually more men who
Mm.
have, let's say, head and neck cancer
Yeah,
all round and have radiation for head and neck cancer, and probably not quite your age group, but the more senior age group
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
But it is interesting. It is a very silent type of cancer. Um,
Mm.
Again, not many, like the general public would not know how radiotherapy is administered to the head and neck, and
No,
that it involves this, horror film like looking masks and being strapped
yeah,
down to a table.
yeah,
So I do feel like, um, as much as I wish that the young tongues, there was no need for the young tongues because there wasn't
yeah,
as many patients. The fact that we have got this growing patient group of younger people, if we,
Yeah,
instead of calling them young, just call them younger,
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
we are more forthcoming in sharing our stories and sharing
yeah,
pictures and raising awareness of what it is like. Because I do feel, I don't know how you feel about it, but in general, sort of, the image of cancer is very much someone who is bald and having chemo and
yeah,
um, not affecting the face or the speech or the being able to eat and swallow. On that note, I guess I want to ask how your experience progressed beyond the first
yeah,
couple of weeks in terms of how you managed. You referenced the peg earlier and saying how
yeah.
what a lifesaver that was. I assume you were nil by mouth at one point, or
Yeah, I can't remember exactly which week it was, but it was probably the treatments. I don't know. It was like almost like psychological. I set myself up for 30 days. Actually, got to get through this. This is it's a marathon, not a sprint. You just got to grind it out. Um, and it was probably the fourth or fifth week that I started the peg feeding overnight. Um, and still doing that now, to be fair. But again, understanding that was again another thing to get your head around, isn't it? Really about not being able to swallow. I think the importance of saliva. I've been saying to people, I've more different types of saliva than there probably is snow. Every day there'd be another type of something else came out of my mouth where I think, where does that come from? What's that about? Either thicker or thinner or greener or whiter, browner or whatever. So understanding that, but I suppose the peg fitting I think that was probably quite traumatic. Again, another anaesthetic, and coming out with this thing in my stomach and thinking, well, how does that work? In the end, I think, bloody hell, it's like a little blow up ball goes into your stomach and they line it up and then it comes out and you've got this tube to feed through. So that was all wasn't exciting, but it was all sorts of things I was learning about and thinking, oh, this is just amazing, really. But then not really realising what it was going to need to me. So the radiotherapy chemo, it was hard to know what effect the chemo had really. Um, I felt that you know I was still got hair. That was the first things people think about, isn't it, about your what happens to your hair. But I think I've been lucky. My older brothers are still very jealous of me for having hair. So I was worried that I might sort of go his way really. But
what, do you
yeah,
know what chemo drug you were on?
I'd have to be into the sea. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's probably an E and an S in
cis
it somewhere. That's probably right. Yeah,
Cispalin, yes.
yeah, something like that. Yeah,
So as far as I'm aware, and I'm not a medic, so I might not be
yeah,
correct, but in general, the type of chemos that our community has doesn't cause hair loss.
yeah, yeah,
Not in a traditional sense. It might be
yeah,
lead to some thinning, and obviously with the radiation,
yeah.
you can get some loss at the bottom of your neck. I don't know if you
Yeah,
had,
that's what I've had.
yeah,
I've had to be, yeah, my barber, he
yeah,
sort of had to explain to him what had happened, so he just cut it a bit higher. But
yeah.
I'm funny enough, I've been laughing again about this, about my beard really. I've never had a beard,
Mm.
but my facial hair actually has changed. So I've not had to shave actually for the last 4 months, and suddenly I've got a moustache that's started appearing.
Yeah.
Seems to be going faster than anyone else. It's a bit bumful on my chin and a bit of a sideboard, but the rest of it's just I've got no
Done.
facial hair at all. So that's been a bit
Well,
of a
that's some very extreme laser treatment. Not the
yeah,
kind I would
yeah,
recommend, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you probably might find it comes back in patches and
Yeah, that's what it
as
seems
it
to be
heals.
doing. But
Yeah,
my head of hairs
the head.
certainly maintains itself, which is good.
Mm.
Yeah, but let's say that for me, 6 weeks sort of ground it out, sort of every day, just sort of going. Weekends it became harder. I think the fifth, remember the fourth and the fifth weekend, they said they'll start to get tough and thinking, shit, yeah, bloody feeling on a Saturday, just exhausted and fatigued, and again all sorts of things happening in your mouth that you know don't know, ulcers and stuff, and then thinking, well, this is really bad, but just wanting to get through it, just thinking I've got to get
Mm.
through it, got to get through it. And then it finished on the Friday, um, and there's an elation about that. I think I don't know. We were just really, really happy. That was the end of the therapy. Everyone was very, pleased that I managed to get through it, and the radiotherapist and stuff saying we'd done really well. And then waking up on the Saturday morning and feeling just terrible
Mm.
and thinking I don't feel very well. And I got a card for them, which I hadn't used at all, to phone up the helpline, and Laura saying, "Oh, they take your temperature," and temperature was high, and then phoning up and them saying, "Actually, yeah, you probably need to come in," and then going into hospital, and I'm saying, "Actually, yeah, you've got a temperature, looks like you've got an infection," and then that was bad, just feeling really run down and being in a ward, or been in a bay, and sort
Right
of
at the
on
very end, huh?
at the very end,
Mm.
at the last, felt like the last hurdle almost,
Mm.
and then being in hospital really for 10 days really. First of all, in a sort of AMU, whatever that's called, whatever that means, and then going to the cancer ward, where again, sort of, 4 or 5 people around me, all different stages of treatments. Partly fascinating. Again, met some amazing people, but equally feeling really poorly, and treatments back on, you know, um, intravenous drugs and pain relief.
Mm-hmm.
Pain relief's a massive thing, isn't it? And having, you know, patches and morphine again, morphine. I was really, never taken any drugs really, and sort of taking morphine, and then sort of my world sort of again, mind altering drugs. Sort of started to realise why progressive rock was something that I'd sort of missed out on, and sort of always
Yeah.
scorned. But listening to King Crimson and various other things
Mm.
sort of made me think that that's probably drug related, and why it actually people get into that sort of thing. But that sort of those 10 days were really quite difficult.
So you
Um,
ended up in hospital for 10 days after
yeah,
finishing
yeah,
radiation.
yeah,
Wow. Okay,
yeah,
that is
yeah,
that was one heck of a infection to
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and again, that was sort of, I suppose, the most worrying time, I think, for Laura. It was, obviously I wasn't at home, having to visit in hospital,
Mm.
seeing people around you who are really, really ill, and then you're surrounded by another uh, 50 NHS staff of all sorts, who are coming and visiting you, changing your bed and giving you drinks and whatever they do. But a lot of people that you realise you're dependent on, who are doing a
Mm.
brilliant job.
Absolutely. I was going to ask earlier on, how did you cope with the transport between home and hospital? Because you
Mm.
mentioned 30 miles. That's quite a distance.
Yeah, well, again, Laura taxis me there and back every day, and like it's a straightforward journey in the sense
Mm.
it's sort of fairly well. It's a motorway really, or dual carriageway all
Mm.
the way. So getting there was always good. But you realise again when you're sitting in the waiting room and watching how many people are dependent on either public transport or taxi or are on their own. Again, and having to both navigate getting to the treatments and the worry that goes through travelling, of being late, of relying on a bus service or a train to get there.
Mm.
Again,
Also in increased risk of infection.
absolutely, absolutely. So, I joked about Laura being my taxi driver, but actually, that was absolute, godsend of having that, that
Mm.
frequency, regularity of routine, and just know we've got a car, we can get there and we can get back.
Yeah.
And yeah, but no, it is a trek. It's controversial, I think, isn't it? Because you can't, I suppose not, you can't have a cancer ward down at the end of your road.
No.
Well, there was funny things about that as well. But actually, you realise what a specialised service it is, how professional that service, certainly my experience was how professional, how different it was to other parts of the NHS where you've got a lot of permanent staff, a lot of people obviously work together as teams who do, you can see that by their general camaraderie and communication that they generally, get on with each other and trust each other and talk to each other, which is so important for such a complex set of.
Yeah, in terms of NHS specifically, so this is UK specific. It is you, you sort of mentioned it earlier how the receptionist made you feel welcome, and that was the first step of a really good patient experience. And I do think overall, from every story I've heard so far, actually, within the UK, within our community, they've always been very, very complimentary towards the radiotherapy departments. Now,
Yeah,
obviously, from a policy perspective, our current or new government wants to make sure that people can access treatment quickly, which is important.
yeah,
But that means they also want to move a lot of things out to community. And I'm not saying, I don't think their plan is to do that so much with radiotherapy, although there are already existing satellite
yeah,
centres. But I
yeah,
think what is really important in whatever change happens, and change has to happen to make sure people can access treatment as quick as possible, is that level of service and that quality of service, which at the moment is very high, doesn't get depleted. Because getting through 30 days, you are not just reliant on the technology and
yeah,
administering the medicine, but the
yeah,
people who do so and get you through those 30 days. And I
yeah,
think your story has very much demonstrated that.
yeah. I think one of the, obviously interested in policy and consultation actually going on in the NHS in the UK at the moment. Um, and obviously from my work and social care, really, I've got my personal instinct always is to have things closer to home. So one of the things that I realised was down my street actually. What goes on down the street before I again started treatment. Because I could, because I can, I just sort of I sort of did a little event. We got 40 houses, and it's partly realising who you don't know down your street, and this really has stuck with me all the way through. So realising, you have neighbours who you know and you say hello to, and you probably know the first name, but there's lots of people that you don't know. So I found three people down my street who I didn't really know, other than their faces, who actually were involved in my treatment. Um, this is the amazing one was the person who actually worked in the lab who did the diagnosis on my biopsy was lived over the road from me. I didn't
Yeah.
know. I knew he worked in the NHS, but I didn't know what he did. And so when he realised that that was happening, somebody else who was junior doctor worked in the maxillofacial unit, knew all about mouths and teeth and all that sort of stuff. And then somebody who was actually involved in lived experience co-production, working with people. And they just lived back down my street. So it partly made me think actually it's partly about the NHS having tentacles everywhere, but also about how people around, how important community is, and being able to connect with people. Sometimes you don't want to, or you wouldn't want to, but actually it is another part of the story, another part of the community, which actually is really important. And related to that is about the NHS services generally, the fragmentation there is between the hospital and the GPs. We've had GP service been very difficult actually. You don't know what they know and what they don't know. Disconnected really from the treatments. The NHS app, that's been one of my themes as well, is about technology. The NHS app, sort of no idea. Some things on it, some things not on it.
Yeah,
who has access to
it's
it.
very patchy, isn't it?
And
Sometimes there are things on it that really shouldn't be on it, and then there are things on there
you
that,
don't
or
you
not on there
forget.
that really should be on
You,
there.
so all of a sudden, there's all these things appeared that your
Yeah.
history, and you didn't know that. So that was one of the things. I found an app that just by again browsing, same way I found you. There was just an app that I sort of downloaded because you have so many appointments and so many drugs and so many things. I ended up, I'm part of, I like technology and stuff, but I ended up going back to having a paper diary because I just thought I can't keep phoning me up and just send it, come in now or tomorrow, and you just lose track. So I kept sort of a paper diary, but also this app. Hoped it would integrate with my Garmin and sort of be able to measure my steps and me temperature every day and me weight and all those sorts of things. But no, they won't talk to each other. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, no,
pencil and paper are sort of
it's,
has backed maybe through. But
yeah,
actually,
it's
you see
still
the
the most
opportunities.
reliable thing, isn't it? It's a notebook,
Yeah,
and then digitizing it at some point. But yeah, yeah,
yeah. You see
no,
the
I get what
opportunity.
you mean.
You see the opportunities, but also you think actually it's a lot of waste actually because actually people don't use it. Another thing, Bob, just on that theme because again it's another thing that I've been using and it's topical is about AI and Chat GPT. So I've been sort of messing around with and using those for the last 18 months, 2 years, whatever, and I found that really, really helpful for me, both in terms of, one of the first things I did was asked ChatGPT, tell me, put in my diagnosis and say what are the questions that I should be asking my consultant, and it came back with a list of 20 very well presented and categorised questions that I read through and checked whether I knew what were. Can you translate all of this medical language into things that I can understand? And that was really helpful. So when I met
Wow.
with my consultants, I got this letter which was based on my ChatGPT questions, and I could tell that it sort of isn't frightened us to death, but it's frightened the nurse to death. She said there's never way she's going to be able to answer all those questions, in a half an hour consultation. But actually, it was really helpful because it partly made them aware of some things that I think everybody would be thinking but wouldn't necessarily ask. But in particular, the language that it used to enable me to describe and to repeat back to the consultant what I thought had actually happened and what was going on, and that was really really helpful. So I've been using that all the way through for some of my artwork and some of my posts and some of the things that I've been writing, and it knows me now. I ask, ChatGPT, you tell me, what's my
Wow.
chronology of treatments over the last 6 months, and
Yeah.
it'll tell me a story about it. And really helpful.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I use ChatGPT for our everyday work because I'm not
Yeah,
very
yeah,
good at,
yeah, absolutely.
I'm good at writing, but not in a very cohesive way. So I chuck
Yeah,
things in there and
absolutely.
then it
Yeah, yeah,
edits it and corrects
yeah.
it. But I must admit, I've never used it as a search engine because I'm still a little bit hesitant in terms of, how much is of it is 100% correct. But I guess there
Well,
has been a big evolution over the last year because
but
I've
again,
noticed what
you
it
know,
can do.
I think different than Google. So Google, I suppose people Google things and ask questions. Which with what I've used ChatGPT for is help me ask questions.
Yeah,
So I'm not
to
looking
find
for
the right
answers.
questions. Yeah,
Help me sort of articulate what it is that I need to know with words I understand.
that's a
And
great tip. I am so going to try that.
yeah,
Yeah, that's brilliant.
so just copying in I've got lots of diagnoses or letters of updating on what's happened. Feeding them in, saying just translate this for me. What does that mean? And been really helpful.
I feel like the only disclaimer we just have to do if anyone goes out and does this and they say it's because of the young time. We didn't say you should do it. Only do
No,
it if you feel comfortable. And also do remember that anything you put into ChatGPT stays in ChatGPT. So if you put
yeah,
personal information up there, it will absorb it in its general vault of knowledge algorithms
these are the big
somewhere. So
these are the big
if you're happy to
philosophical.
share, then share.
Yeah,
If not, then maybe that's not the best idea.
well,
Or,
these are the
or
big these are big philosophical and ethical questions that
Ethical
everyone's
questions,
grappling with,
isn't it?
really.
Yeah.
And I think it's much better to experiment yourself and find out what you're comfortable with rather than somebody else telling you what you should be comfortable with.
Very true. Very
Yeah.
true. Oh, Pete, it's been such a delight in having you, and I just want to say from my from where I stand, thank you, honestly, deep-hearted. Thank you so much for all the funds you raised, for the awareness that you've raised, for sharing your journey with us, not just today but throughout via the group. I personally, and I know the rest of the community, really appreciate all of your sharing, and it's been a complete delight to have you on here today.
Yeah, well, I've really enjoyed it, Barbara, and again, a big shout out really to the group because I think every day there's something on there, isn't there, where you think, oh, I haven't thought of that, oh yeah, I recognise that, and this is what I did, or this is what happened to me, and that peer support, which I would say, finally, Barbara, is that I think within the NHS, there's probably there's always a big reticence about, possibly about Google, quite rightly, possibly about ChatGPT, but also about sort of online networks and a fear that people will listen to other people giving them unsound advice or scaring them or making them think differently. Like I think that's again just a general thing that we all have to deal with really about how we deal with information, how we deal with other opinion, how we deal with other people's how what other people are going through, recognizing that we're all different, as everybody will say, everyone's journey is slightly different. But actually having that lived experience, people with who've gone through what you've gone through, around supporting, cheering, uh, maybe advising, but really just being there to understand what you're going through is just such an invaluable resource to have available. So I'd really like to thank you, Barbara, for having the foresight and the drive to get it set up because it is absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you, Pete. I really appreciate it. Also, thank you to our listeners for joining us today. As you heard from Pete, if you've been diagnosed with tongue cancer and are aged 18 to 64 and haven't joined our group yet, well, what are you doing? Come and join us. Come and join the community.
Yeah.
We have a private Facebook group, but if you're not on Facebook, do send us an email or a DM, and we have some other spaces available as well. Sign up to our mailing list and make sure you hit follow and subscribe on the podcast. If you'd like to come onto the podcast and share your experience, then please contact us on podcast@youngtonguesglobal.com. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week. Bye bye.
Thanks, Barbara.